names files. So we'll discuss today. So what is listener and what it will do. So what is a tnsnames.ora file? So we'll see. Okay, so let me open Paint. Okay, how the connections are established. So this is my Oracle database server. This is my application server. Okay, so this is first user, second user, third user, fourth user. Let me user 1, user 2. Okay, this is user 2, user 3, user 4. So from application, so multiple users they can try to establish the connection. So in the database server, this is my database. Okay, what is my database name? This is my container database. Inside one container, there are multiple PDBs are there. This is one PDB. This is second PDB. So let's see. This is what is my container database? HRMS. What is other PDBs? This is my HRMS PDB1, HRMS PDB1. This is my other PDB2, HRMS PDB2. So these all are my database. It's a container database. This is for container HRMS. This is for pluggable database HRMS PDB2, HRMS PDB1. Okay. So there is a listener process. The listener is a service which is running on the database server side. This is about a listener. Listener. So you can say this is the listener. Okay. So how the users are establish the connection? They have to use either SQL plus, if it is command line mode, SQL plus, if it is GA mode, they have to use SQL developer or Toad. Any one of the client tool they have to use, and they have to enter the details, port number, database name, username, password. Then when you click on connect, so these all the connections will be received by who received from DBA, and there is a the first all the connections will be received by listener process. Yes, third connection, fourth connection. These are all the connections received by postmaster, listener process, which is listening on default port number 1521. Our database running with the default port number 1521. Once listen these all the connections. It received by listener, just it pass the connections to database server. In the database server side, there is a another process, server process. It take care of authentication. It go for authentication, whether it is a username and password is valid or not. So the port number, DB name valid or not. If all are good, then it allow to establish the connection. If anything is wrong, suppose username password is wrong, so it throws the error invalid username password. Or so for establish the connection, what we in the database server side, the listener should be up and running. The listener should be up and running. Then only we can establish the connection. If there is no listener, suppose listener is not running, so we cannot establish the connection. If the listener should be up and running, whatever the database running in the database server side, these all the database listener should be registered. Listener should be registered. So if the listener is registered, so suppose, so what are the databases? You can say HRMS container database, it's registered, and HRMS PDB1 it's registered, HRMS PDB2. These are all the database registered with listener. If listener doesn't register any databases, that means we cannot establish the connection. So the listener should be up and running in the DB server side. Then the listener should be registered with all the database which are running in the database server. If it is registered, then only the connection is successfully established. So the listener should be registered in two ways. There are two methods are there. So one is static registration, dynamic registration, static registration. So you can say listener should be registered all the database in two ways. One is a dynamic registration. So when you start the listener automatically it's identify all the databases. It's registered automatically. That is the dynamic registration. Static registration means when we can static registration will be happen in case of non-default port number. Non-default port number. What is the non-default port number? 1521. If the database is running with a non-default port number, there is a static registration will be happened. If the database running with a default port number 1521, automatically it's a dynamic registration is happened and registered all the databases. Okay. So the listener should be running. You have to configure the listener if the listener does not exist. So how to configure the listener? There are two ways. One is manual method. Second is manual method. How to configure the listener? Just creating the file, add the parameters. Second, there is a net CA, net configuration assistant. Net configuration assistant, DBCA, database configuration assistant, to create new database. To create a new listener, we have to use netCA or netMGR. netMGR, net manager, netMGR. So if you want to configure GUI mode, if you want to configure the listener in GUI mode, you have to use either netCA or netMGR utilities. These two are the utilities. By using these two, we can configure the listener and tnsnames.ora file. If you want to configure the listener tnsnames.ora file manually, you can just create the file v8 file name. You can add the parameters. What are the parameters? If you want to create those two files using GA method, you have to using netCA or netmgr. You have to invoke this utility. There is a prompt will open, net configuration assistant. There you have to create a listener. Then you have to create a TNS names. So once creation is done, you can close the window. Then you can see both the files are created. It's added all the parameters. What are the parameters you given in the prompt? So these are the two methods to configure the listener and the tnsnames.ora file. So these are the two methods. Listener is registered in two ways. One is dynamic registration. Second is static registration. So if there is no registration happened, what is the issue? It cannot accept any remote connections. We cannot connect the database remotely. If you want to connect the database remotely, the listener should be up and running. The listener should be registered all the database in the database server side. Then only we can establish the connection remotely. Yes, any queries from anyone? Okay, so let's see. We seen last time. Okay, so how to manage this listener? Stop and start and restart. There is a utility lsnrctl start. So let me connect my database server. So this is my database server. Let me log in. Terminal. if config, can say what is the 113. Let me connect putty 192.168.0.133 113 or 113. Okay. 192.168.0.113 root Oracle. So let me close this one. Let me increase the font size. Appearance change bold. Okay. So let me check the what is the entry, host entry details. Yes, the right IP address is there. Yes, fine. You can switch to Oracle user because we installed and configured database with Oracle user. So you have to switch to Oracle user if you want to start the database or connect the database. Now let me set up the environment variable. So HRMS, yes, I set the environment variable. How to confirm? Echo dollar Oracle home. Yes, my DB home it set under Oracle SID, my DB name it set automatically. So what was the database in this? You have to cat/etc host file. By seeing this file, we can understand there is a sorry cat/etc Ora tab. So there is a two database are created. So if not running, if you want to, you can start the databases. So there is a HRMS database. Let me start the HRMS database. SQL plus slash as both the database are not running. You can say pmon. Now I want to start the HRMS database. I already set the environment. SQL plus slash as sysdba connected ideal instance. You can say now how to start the database. Startup. Let it start. You can say Oracle instance started here. Someone wants something. Go ahead. Or else okay. Keep just mute. Okay, if you have any queries, you can unmute and you can talk. So you can say show PDBS. So the database will be open mount state. How to open read? How to open the database in read write mode? Alter pluggable database. What is the pluggable database name? Open. So the my pluggable database open in read write mode. Can say show PDBS. If the database open in read write mode, then I can connect database remotely. Okay. So exit. Now you can verify here. PS minus grep pmon. My database is running HRMS database. Now I want to start the listener. So where the what is the location of listener default listener file TNS names file where it was located? Oracle home network admin. This is the default location for listener file under tnsnames.ora file. So listener file, it contains listener information, means where my database is running and what the database is running on which port. That is the listener information. It contains listener.ora file. So the listener.ora file always it's located inside Oracle database server. tnsnames.ora file, it's a client. This file is located client side. Wherever the application user trying to connect, their side they have to configure this tnsnames.ora file. So as a DBA in the database server side also this file is there to check the connection. So what it contains? So which database you want to connect? The database information is there. You can say this is the DB name. This is the host name. In this host my database is running. What is the port? 1521. Service name HRMS. This is the first database name. So like this, how many database you started in this server? You created that many database entries you have to add tnsnames.ora file. So what is the use of this tnsname.ora file? To check the connection. So wherever the application user is trying to connect from that application, from that server, they have to configure tnsnames.ora file if they want to connect the database using service name HRMS. Or if they want to connect the database using a host name, port number, username, password, that's fine. So I don't want to enter all the details, username, password, DB name, all the things. Simple, if you want to connect the service name, you must and should configure tnsnames.ora file. This is always need at a client side. DBA side, it's required listener.ora file. So let me check the listener status, LSNR status. No listener. Now I started my database, but I did not start the listener. So there is no use. Even though if you start the database, if someone try to establish the connection to this database, they are getting the error. What is the error? No listener. So I have to start after starting the database. Make sure you have to check the listener is started or not. If not started, you can start. LSNR start. Yes, started. Listener is started. Now you can verify status. You can say. So the listener is, let me ps minus ef grep pman. Yes, LSNR status. Now you can say when you start the listener, so there is only one service is there. Now you can say how many services it's showing. HRMS and CRMS. Instance HRMS status is ready. That means listener is registered with all the databases inside the server. HRMS database, CRMS database. It registered all the database. When you start the listener, it's not registering. It takes at least 1 minute time. It's going to verify what are the database inside the server. It identified and it registered. For that, it takes 1 minute time to register all the database. Now you can connect the database remotely, either HRMS or CRMS. Now it's running only HRMS. So you can connect the database remotely to this database only. My listener is running, my database is running. Yes, you can establish the connection remotely or locally to this database. For CRMS, database is not running. So if the listener is not running, let me stop the listener. Listener stop. Yes, can say. Suppose let me move this underscore BKP. Now we are assuming there is no listener file. If it is listener file is there, like this file is there. .ora, the listener file. System is identified. If the file is there, what is the file extension? .ora, not .ora backup. This is the backup file. There is no listener file right now. So if there is no listener file, you have to create the listener. How to create the listener? There is two methods are there. One is you can create a listener file. You can create a file, add the listener entries. What are the listener entries? The basic listener entries. These are the basic details required to configure the listener. Listener, this is the name of the listener. This is the name of the listener. Description list. Description equal to address equal to what is the host name? This is my address. My database running with this port number. Close the bracket. Close the bracket. This is the basic listener. If you want to configure the listener, you have to use these entries. Let me use this listener listener.ora. I am creating the listener by creating the file. This is the manual method. I am going to configure the listener by using manual method. So how to configure the listener manual method? You have to create a file first. You have to add the details. So what is my database host? You can give the host name. You can get the host name. What is the port number? My database is running a default port number only. So let me save this file. Now I configured a listener manual method by creating the file. So what it contains? It contains the listener information where my database is running. This is on this host. You can say host name. You can give the right host name. So what is your port number? Which database is running on this default port number. So this is the default listener configuration. So now if you can start the listener. Once configure the listener, you can use any method, either manual method or netca or netmgr. Once listener file is existing, you can start the listener. Let me start the listener lsnr start. Now you can say Listener is started, but the listener support no services. Means just now started the listener. It's going to identify what are the database are there in this server and it register itself. What type of registration? It's a dynamic registration because my database is running with the default port number. Now you can say status. It takes 1 minute time to register all the databases. It's showing the services. Let me see. Can say now it's registered and it's showing all the services. Instance HRMS registered. If it is listener is registered with database, if it is dynamic registration, the listener status should be ready. If it is static registration, the status should be unknown. That means if you see this status is ready, that means listener is registered with the databases via dynamic registration. Dynamic registration is happened. That means my database is running a default port number. So whenever you start the listener, it's not immediately register all the databases. It takes less than 1 minute time. That during that 1 minute time, it's going to identify how many databases are there. It's registered all the databases and it's showing all the services. HRMS, yes, registered. There is other database you can say CRMS database. Status, now you can say only one database is running, it's registered. If you start the CRMS database, yes, that database also it's registered. HRMS XDB is the default database. Inside the container there is a HRMS XDB. We never used this DB, but there is a default container database is there, that is the service. So we are using make sure HRMS instance is ready in the listener status. That means the listener is registered with HRMS database via dynamic registration. Now I can establish the connection remotely from SQL developer or some other client mission, whatever. So let me check, let me SQL, let me open the SQL developer. Any queries you can ask. I open the SQL developer, we know how to install and configure. Let me make new connection. Yes, I am configuring new connection. So suppose HRMS DB, HRMS DB. Yes, what is the username? Sys. What is the password? Oracle. It should be sysdba. Save the password. What is the host name? 192.168.0.113. What is the service name? HRMS. When you test the connection, we'll see the connection is succeed or not. Means what are the details? If it is correct, this connection is received by listener in the database server side because we given the database server name 113 where my database is running. So this connection is received by listener. Listener is checking. If the listener is not yet started, then we got the error. Can say no listener on host. No listener at host 113. That means let me verify my listener is really not started. Yes, it started. So what could be the issue? Maybe yes, firewall. System CTL status firewall D. You can say system CTL status firewall D. You can say it's running. Let me stop the list firewall. Stop. Yes. Now can say, now can check. Test the connection again. Success. Actually, the firewall is running. It's not a listener issue. Even though sometimes it throws the error, no listener something. That time you can verify all the details. Whether it is a host name, DBA host name is correct or not. Whether a port number is correct or not. Whether a service name is correct or where we can pick the service name in the listener status. You can say service HRMS as one instance. My listener support HRMS instance, HRMS service. Yes, I given right service name only, DB name. So what is the username? What is the password? Everything is correct or not? If everything is correct, yes, I can establish the connection. So you can say connector. We establish the, let's say, you can say, so here you can say select star from Lares show PDBS. It gives the pluggable database information. Yes, I got the output. Means successfully I connected my database. I established the connection via SQL developer. I able to get the output. Suppose if you stop the listener, now I am going to stop the listener. Let me switch to SU hyphen Oracle. If you stop the listener, is there any impact already connections? HRMS. Now you can say LSNR CTL status status. Can say my listener is running. Let me stop the listener. Yes. Now check the status. No listener. Now you can say its connection is already connected. Now let me run the query. Yes. Again I get the output. That means if the listener is stopped, there is no impact for already connected connections. If you try to make a new connection, let me try make a connection, new connection, HRMS, new connection, something, connection name. So sys user, password Oracle, sys DBA, can say what is the host name, 192.168.0.113. What is the service name, HRMS. Now try to test. Now can say it throws error, no listener at host. This is expected because I stopped the listener here. There is no listener. If you state as the listener, there is no listener. It cannot allow to for new connections. It's not allowed for new connections. There is no impact for already connected connections. They can run smoothly. But if you try to establish new connection, there is no listener, it throws the error. Clear? If listener is stopped, there is no impact for already existing connections, but it should not allow newly connections. Whatever who are trying to establish the connection, so new connections not allowed if listener is not running. So let me start the listener again. Yes, can say when you start the listener support no services means just to start a listener, my listener going to identify how many databases are running and it's going to register with the databases. That is a dynamic registration. When dynamic registration happen, if your database is running, default port number and also your listener name is listener. That is the default name for listener. So now can check status. Now can say it's already registered whatever the running databases. Now you can go and try. Test the connection. Yes, success. Clear? This is how you can configure the listener by manual method. You can create a file, add the listener parameter file. Then you can start the listener. Then you can stop the firewall. Then try to establish the connection remotely. Even though if you already after establish the connection, if you stop the listener, there is no impact for existing connections. It's not allow for newly connections. There is no impact for existing connections. Okay. So now I need to configure the listener GUI mode. So what are the utilities we can use to configure the listener GUI mode? netcar, netmgr. How to configure the listener in netcar or netmgr? Let me stop the listener first. Let me stop the listener and let me delete the listener file so that we can understand. So the listener file is created or not if you done via netca. Oracle home, network, admin. Now you can say let me rm-rf or you can take the backup. Move _1. Now there is no listener.ora file. There is no tnsname. You can move and inside one. Now you can say There is no listener.ora file. There is no tnsname.ora file. Instead of removing, just I change the name. Move command. From this name to, we are going to change the name. Actually, this is the name. I am going to change this name to this name. So this file is there, tnsname.ora underscore one. So there is no listener.ora file, there is no tnsnames.ora file. I need to configure these two, listener and tnsname.ora file, by using GUI method, either netcr, netmgr. These are the utilities. All the utilities binaries, where it was located. What is the default location for all the utilities? Yes. All the utilities. What was the location of all the utilities?
Inside
Any
bin folder,
database.
sir.
Any database.
Inside bin folder, sir.
So inside bin folder. So where it was bin folder, where it was located?
Under home location.
Under home location. Let me go to cd $oracle home / bin. Now you can say there are many utilities are there. Let me ls-lrt netca. Yes, this is the utility. Netca means net configuration assistant. So ls-lrt another file. What is another file? netmgr, net manager. You can use any one of the utility. You can configure listener or tnsnames.ora file. This is for GUI method. If you want to configure the listener, so if you configure the listener tns.ora file by using GUI method, either netc or netmgr, no need to enter all the parameters. What are the parameters? You can select the GUI prompt. Once you selected, when you click on finish, it creates two files, tnsnames.ora file, listener.ora file. Let's see. Okay, let me go to the here. Let me see. Let me insert from here. So x host plus su-oracle cd user1 app oracle. What is the product? 19c db home 1 bin. So export display variable. Export display equal to :0. Then netca. You can say how to invoke /netca. So you can say listener configuration. I want to configure the listener file. So default selected listener configuration means we are going to configure listener file. Click on next. So select what you want to add. Yes, I want to add the listener file. By default selected add. There is no reconfigure, there is no delete, there is no rename. Why? But as of now, there is no listener.configuration file, listener.ora file. There is no file in the network admins. That's why it's selected add only, enable add option only. If we have already listener.ora file, these there are remaining options also enabled. Delete, rename, reconfigure. So click on next. So what listener? Its listener should be. It should be one name. What name you want to keep for listener? The default listener name is listener only. If you want to change, you can change listener one like this. So I want to keep listener name is listener only. Click on next. So which protocol we are using? TCP protocol. So default selection. Click on next. So use the standard port number. Yes. For this listener 1521 is the default port number only I want to use. Click on next. It's selected already. Would you like to configure another listener? No. Just I want to configure only one listener only. Yes, it finished. If you want to configure another listener, click on yes, click on next. I don't want to configure another listener. So click on next. You can say listener configuration complete. Click on next. Yes, done. Now you can go and see su-oracle. Sorry. su-oracle .oraenv. Set the environment. Go to cd $oracle home. Oracle home network admin. Now you can see here listener.ora file just now created. Time, you can say time 21:37. Yes, the same timestamp the file was created. What are the parameters required? It's added. You can say listener. The same name we given in the prompt. Default listener name is listener. Description list. Description address protocol TCP protocol we selected. Host name, yes, we given, it's taken default host name, the Linux host name. Port 1521 we given the standard port name. So these are the basic listener. To configure the listener, these are the basic entries required. If you want to configure manual, you have to add these details. If you want to configure via GUI mode, there you can select the options. Listener name, what is the standard port number? Click on next. It will, when you finish in the GUI prompt, backend it's created automatically the listener.ora file. We configured listener only right now. I want to configure tnsnames.ora file also via GUI method. Let me go and see. So TNS names means local net service name configuration. tnsnames.ora file means you have to select local net service name configuration. Click on next. I want to add the tnsnames.ora file. Click on next. So can say for which, what is the service? Service means database name. Which database you want to configure the tnsname.ora file? Service name means database name, HRMS. Yes or no? My database name is HRMS. The same database name you can say service name. Click on next. So yes, protocol TCP only. Host name. Where my database is running? Yes, this is the my database host name. Let me give the host name. Oh, okay. So let me give IP address 168.0.113. What is the port number? Yes, 1521 it's selected. If it is non-default port number, you have to select this and give the non-default port number. Default selected, default port number only. Click on next. So you can say you can verify that Oracle database can be reached using the information provided by performing a connection test. Would you like to test that connection can be made to the database? No, I do not test. Click on next. So net service name, yes, HRMS DB name. Click on next. Would you like to configure another net service name? No, I don't want to configure another one. Just I configured one net service name, that is tnsnames.ora file. Click on next. Can say net service name configuration complete. Click on next. Finish. Yes, we done. Now you can go and see. Now tnsnames.ora file also created. You can say date. How can verify just now created or not? You can see the timestamp 2141. Here 2140. Just now 1 minute before the file was created. So let's see what it contains. tnsname.ora DB details. Service DB name HRMS. Service name we given HRMS. Host name we given in the prompt 113. Port number we selected 1521. Like this, it contains the DB details. What is the use of this file? To check the connection. How to check the connection? TNS ping HRMS. So it's pinging. If it's pinging means okay. That means its database is ping. That means the connection is good. We can connect from anywhere. If it is not pinging, suppose here it throws the error. That means there's something is given wrong details. That's how we can configure listener tnsnames.ora file, either manual method or GUI method. If it is GUI method, you can use netcar, netmgr utilities. We can configure listener.ora file, which contains listener information, tnsnames.ora file, which contains database information. So after you build the database server, we have to share the TNS names entries to application developer, because where my database is running, what is my database name, what is my port, all the details here. If it is Postgres, there also we have to share what is DB name, DB host name, username, password, and port number. For any database where you database created, where your database is running, what is port number, what is the DB name, these are all the details you have to share to application developer. They can configure TNS entries their side. By using this TNS entries, they can connect, they can establish the connection to our database. The mainly use of this tnsnames.ora file for end users as a DBA to check the connections by using TNS ping DB name. To check the connections, we are using tnsname.ora file. Clear? Any queries? Configure the listener. Configure the tnsname.ora file. How to start the listener. So how to it register the databases. What are the types of registration? Dynamic or static? If it is dynamic means when you start the listener, it takes less than 1 minute time. It registered all the databases. If it is registered, then only you can connect the database. So you can say, let me start the listener now. LSNR Let me make the connection first. So you can say here, yes, 113 service name HRMS. Let me start the listener. I configured listener. Okay, I configured a listener via GUI mode. That is netCA. LSNR start. I'm starting the listener. You can say already started. Status. Now you can say it's registered all the database. Let me stop the listener. Let me start it again. Now you can say now listener is started. There is no services. Means it not yet registered. Now if you try to test the connection, cannot connect the database. Service HRMS is not registered with the listener. Clearly saying. Why we are not able to establish the connection? Listener is started, but listener is not registered database HRMS status. Still not yet registered. If you see listener status like this means there is some issue. It's not yet registered. So you have to, after starting the listener, it takes 1 minute time to find, identify all the databases and it register the database automatically. You can say still not yet. Let's wait. PS minus EF, grep pman. No services. Let's wait. You can say now it registered all the database. What are the database running currently? Now you can go on the try. Test. Success. Immediately success. Like this, every day we are getting this type of issues. Application user, they don't know. Maybe they given wrong details, host name or service name. So they say, okay, this is the error I am getting. I am trying to establish the connection as SQL developer. Yes, you have to verify as a DBA. What database they given? What is the service name? The listener is running or not? Database server side. If it is running, listener is registered all the databases. Listener is started, it's running, but listener support no services. That means no one can establish the connection to the database. Like this, we can verify step by step. Clear? Any queries from anyone?
Yeah, hi Venki.
Go ahead.
So this LSNRCTL will read the contents from the listener.ora file, right?
Yes.
Right?
Correct. It will
Okay.
it,
So
it will read the listener.ora file whenever the connection is hitting to database. Someone is trying to establish the connection. So listener received the connection and first listener verify. If listener is running, then only it receive the connection. Then it listener.ora file, it verify the details, then go to the database, whether database is running or not. Suppose if database is not open state, so we got error database not open. Means it contact to database, it connected to database. Database is running or not. If it is running, it will establish the connection. It's a mediator listener. end user and the database. In between end user and the database. Once the connection is established, it's out of the connection. Then directly server process communicate to user request. Yes, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, this is listener.ora file and tnsnames.ora file is purely for the remote connections. So if we want to run the database locally and we want to connect the database locally means these two files configuration is not required. We can start the database instance and we can connect locally, correct?
Yes, correct. Let me can say back. Let me stop the listener. I will show you practically. ls minus lrt move listener.ora file. This is my current. This is the 2. I am moving the listener. Then move the tnsnames.ora file underscore 2. Now there is no listener.ora file. Can say. So now there is no listener status. LSNR CTL status. No listener. Can say let me connect SQL plus slash as is DBA. Yes, connected.
Yeah, clear.
So
to which
that's
DB
why
is
when we start
is
the
connected?
database, make sure we have to verify the listener is started or not. You can connect the database locally, but no one can establish the connection remotely if listener is not running. The listener is mandatory. tns.ora file, it's optional. What is the use of tns.ora file in the database server side? Just to check the connection.
Okay.
Okay.
And now we have connected to Oracle, but which instance it got connected?
HRMS. We have only one database, one instance is running. You can say.
Okay.
If it is 2 is running means you can select the ORA env. You have to set up the database environment by calling ORA env. Which database you want to connect? Suppose I want to connect CRMS. Set this like this. You can give the database name. So if it is running, it set the automatically Oracle home. It set. Then you can SQL plus slash is DBA directly connected to CRMS database. HRMS. Now you given HRMS. Now if you give slash SQL plus slash as is DBA, you can say show PDBS. I connected HRMS PDB pluggable database. So you can say if you want to select a name, comma, open underscore mode from V dollar database. There is a system table. It gives the database name HRMS. This database we connected. This is the pluggable database. This is the DB name. We connected HRMS DB because here we given HRMS database. When you give .orinv, it will ask which database you want to connect. Yes, HRMS. It will set the Oracle home automatically. Then SQL plus slash is DBA directly connected to this DB. Clear?
Yeah.
Okay,
Clear.
so that's
And one more last doubt.
go ahead.
So just now you said with many names, with many names, we can create many listener.ora and tnsnames.ora files, right? Why do we create generally many
No, just I
each
took
for
the backup. I
each
took the
instance?
backup. Instead of removing the files, I took the backup. Out of this system is identified. You can start the listener. If the file is existing listener.ora file, is there any file is there listener.ora file?
No.
Yeah, yes, I removed. Now, if you want to start the listener, let me start lsnr start. Can say it's supported. Stay.
No, the status will not
ls.
change to
Yes,
successfully
no
connected.
services. So
Yeah,
you
I
have to
got that.
create the listener.ora file. Can say here. Still, it's showing no services only. So you have to create, you have to change the file listener.ora file. This is the latest file, right? Yeah. Let me back to move. Now can say lsnr stop. You can start again. Now can say let's wait. already started. So it takes less than 1 minute time. It registered all the database inside this server. What are the database running? Let me check. Now you can see all the database registered. So what is my listener? You can see here.
Yeah.
This is my listener name. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah,
What is the
my
listener
doubt is,
parameter file here? It takes listener.ora file. You can see which
what
listener
if we
file
give
using.
when we create one listener with the by calling the netca
Uh-huh.
configuration, when we give the name other than listener underscore maybe something
You can
2
give any
dot
name.
aura,
Yes.
then it will take.
That is the listener name. You can configure with any name.
Will this instance identify if listener.aura is not available? Will it consider listener dot some other name?
When you give listener name listener 1 2, it's created listener name is listener 1. The file is same. File is same for any listener name.
Okay, it's just alias.
Just
Okay,
a name.
okay,
My
got it. Yeah.
default listener name is listener. Even the default listener, when you click on netca, it's asking default listener name. It's already taken. Name is listener. So we proceed next. If you
Okay.
don't want to proceed with the default listener name, listener, you can change the name listener 1 2. But the backend file is created with this file only. This is a fixed file name.
Got
TNS names means tnsnames.ora. These are the fixed file names are fixed. You can configure listener with any name. If it is suppose my listener name is listener 1. Now when you stop and start, suppose status, you have to give the listener name like this. If it is default listener, no, not required. Just give listener listener CTL status. If it is listener name
it.
is different non-default, you can give the listener name. Always you have to give the listener name while status, while stopping, while starting the listener. Understand?
Yeah, got it. Thank you.
Yeah. If it is default listener name listener, no need to specify listener name. Default takes listener name is listener. So you can use without listener name, you can stop and start, check the listener. Okay, so in this file is there. Okay, so how to configure the listener? This is manual method. Then listener configuration. There is a to all the theory points and the practical sections are there. You can say this is manual method. You can add these entries. Then start the listener. Yes, a listener CTL start because my listener name is listener. Even though it's optional, if you want to specify, you can specify or else not required. Then check the listener. When you check the listener, what will happen? Initially, the listener support no services because it's not registered any databases. So it is identify all the database, what are the database running. So it's registered all the database automatically. It takes for that registration, it takes 1 minute time. After 1 minute, if you see listener status, it's showing all the databases. How many database running? All the database registered automatically. That is a dynamic registration. Listener got to know these are the database available are ready for connect. If you see listener status is ready, means there is a dynamic registration happened. Then tnsname.ora file available. It needs at client place. Then configure the tnsname.ora file. Yes, manually if you want to configure like this. Check the connection. How to check TNS ping DB name? What is the DB name here? HRMS. So if you it's pinging means okay 0 milliseconds. That means connection is good. Next configure the listener net manager or net CA. Same thing we did. Okay, the same thing we written here. Then you can see there is a two files are created listener and tnsname.ora file. In cat, when you cat see this file output, this is the entries added automatically when you configure via netca GUI method. So tnsname.ora file content like this. Then if it is static registration, so when you can go static registration, if your database is running with a non-default port number, your listener name is non-default listener name. In that scenario, you have to go with static registration. If it is static registration, we have to add the entries in the listener.configuration file. Listener.ora file. This is the basic listener configuration. If you want to static registration, if you want to do static registration, SID list underscore listener name is underscore. This is the listener name. SID list, SID description. What is the SID name? I want to register the database, this database via static registration. You can add these details so that the database is registered with the listener via static registration. So when you can this static registration, in that scenario, you can see listener.ora file like this. This is for database registration via static registration. This is for listener entries. So the status of service is shown as unknown in case of static registration. In case of dynamic registration, it's showing ready. Okay, so that's about listener tnsname.ora file. We'll see tomorrow remote connections, not tomorrow